What's a family secret you didn't get told until you were older that made things finally make sense? Story number 1. My father always talked about how his brother lied to a doctor so he could get disability. I thought it was so easy for anyone just to get disability. Check. All you had to do was tell your doctor you were abducted by aliens. Years later, my father had a mental breakdown. He starts telling stories about the government implanting a chip in his brain. He went out and got a CAT scan as proof, and he would point to things that weren't there. My father was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and years later he started collecting a disability check because he couldn't find a job. Kind of hard to perform any job when every conversation, including interviews, veers into the government, quote, trying to send you with some aliens. As an adult, it dawned on me when my aunt mentioned mental illness runs in the family. My uncle had never lied to his doctors. He told the doctor what he believed to be the absolute truth. He had been abducted by aliens. Story number 2. Last year I found out my father isn't actually my biological father. He got my sister and me those Ancestry DNA kits for Christmas to do for fun as a family, and once we got the results, it showed he wasn't my biological father. Well, the ducked up thing is that my mom knew the whole thing, and never told anyone. For 26 years, she kept this as a secret, and never had any intention of telling the truth. When I confronted her about it, she denied, and then once I showed her the results, she finally confessed. She'd have an affair with her college boyfriend while my father was on a business trip for a couple months. After I found out all of this, things finally started making sense. Her and I have never had a great relationship. I always envied other girls growing up that had great mother-daughter relationships and never understand why they couldn't be me. She was very verbally and sometimes physically abusive towards me growing up, but never towards my sister. She knew I was the product of her affair, and she was ashamed of me. So she would take it out on me. I was always told I was 6 weeks premature, but now I know she was lying so she could keep her timeline straight, so my dad would not find out about the affair. She had another affair with my soccer coach when I was 10, which led to my parents' divorce later that year, and blamed it all on me. All of her wrongdoings she would blame on me, and now it all makes sense. She's just a really messed up woman. I'm not on speaking terms with her anymore, nor do I really care to meet my biological father. Maybe someday, but I'm not ready to yet. My relationship with my father has never been better, and that's all I really care about. Story number 3. My aunt and uncle, who passed away when I was 11, they were drug addicts. I adored them, but as I got older, I started seeing less and less of them and never understood why. My parents briefly told me when I was 16 that my uncle did not die of a brain tumor. Actually had one though, but instead, well, he used a gun somehow on himself while my aunt was in the other room, which led to my aunt's drug-related death on New Year's Day. They finally told me the whole story when I was 21. I was the last person to know. Even my little brother knew before me, because I was extremely close to them and looked so highly upon them, and I still do. I wish I could have known sooner, but I do understand why they didn't tell me. Story number 4. I got a great uncle whose children look nothing like her husband. Turns out, he had a mumps as a kid and it left him sterile. So he asked a buddy to, quote, contribute because he and his wife wanted children. They kept this secret, insisting that the children just looked like someone on great uncle's side of the family. We never met them. For years they told us this until his funeral. And when she decided to tell her kids that their biological donor was a man who died in the army. Yeah, it was weird, but it caused exactly the kind of chaos that great uncle would have loved. He wasn't a bad person, but He loved to cause a little bit of shock and horror on occasions. And just the idea that the whole family would be freaking out over this instead of crying for him would have made him laugh himself sick. Things he did while alive included the time he gave me a pet chicken, without any input from my parents. The day he packed up a bunch of cousins and took us all out to a theme park, instead of the boring family gathering he was supposedly headed to. In the days before cell phones, and how he handled his son being gay. Long story short, on the last one, he was scolding his daughters about being sexually active at 15, and, well, and I quote, "I specifically told you all to be gay until you got out of high school. Did no one obey me?" His son replied with, "I did. I'm gay, Dad." And his response was, "See, he knows how to obey his father. This is why he's my favorite, you know." This was all done in a restaurant, while other family members looked horrified. And yes, my cousin really is/was gay. His sister had a baby at 17, and her father's reaction to that was, and I quote, "Well, the time to yell at you is over. If you're keeping it, we better start buying clothes. Kids are messy." Story number 5. My late father was a great dad. Went to work, came home every night, and nothing was really out of the ordinary, except that he would ask my sister and I to let him use the money from our piggy banks. My grandfather lived with us, and he had a great pension and relatively no bills. So he spoiled us rotten and would give us money, because he knew we had it, but told us not to tell anyone that he'd just give it back. He would also just really only have 2 moods, really cranky or extremely sweet. My sister and I called it his nice face. This was all we knew until I was about in 8th grade. We went to a private school, and my dad would tell us school was canceled, there was a gas leak, institute days, etc., and we could stay home. When we would go back to school, nobody else would know what we meant, as they've been in school that day. One day, just before my graduation, my mother let out a scream and started screaming. Our house was being foreclosed on, and my father had not been paying the mortgage, and had been trying to cover up for the fact that he had been a functioning addict. The quote, nice face was just because he was on drugs. The school absence were because he'd spent tuition money on drugs, and then had to pay before my mother caught wind. Apparently, it had gotten worse by this time, but he'd been an addict for more than 20 years, and none of us even knew. Story number 6. I was an only child, and my mother was 40, and father was 50 when they had me. They had gotten together rather late in life. My mother always told me that my father did not want her to get pregnant, because he was afraid she was too old and didn't want anything to happen to her or the baby. After my father passed away at the age of 95, I took my mother to the Social Security office to take care of paperwork. One of the questions they asked was whether there were any potential beneficiaries of my father's benefits, such as other children or ex-wives. Being an only child, I just immediately answered no. Well, my mother looked at me sheepishly and answered, "Well, that's not exactly correct." It was then, at the age of 45 in the Social Security building, that I learned that my father had previously been married in his 20s and had a child. Mother and baby died during childbirth. It explained why my parents never had children until late at life and why he had not wanted to. Wow. Story number 7. Okay. So when I was a little kid, my uncle had something going on. As a small child, the details were frequently lost to me, so after a while, I just kind of accepted it. Now, he is also a notorious jokester, so I never knew when he was being serious or not. One time, I was sitting with my uncle, and he was talking about a recent doctor visit. He told me entirely straight-faced that he had eaten some watermelon seeds by mistake, and they had taken root and started sprouting in his stomach. So, he had to get them surgically removed. To my 8-year-old self, this made utmost complete sense, and I took this advice to be very diligent. When consuming my soccer practice watermelon slices, make sure to avoid all seeds. And that was basically it. I went on through life just accepting this whole story, never even questioning it once. Until one day, I was around 13. When somehow a realization just clicked into place where, holy crap, my uncle had cancer. Somehow this had slipped past my gullible child mind for years, and there was never a moment where my parents decided to tell me about it. Instead, at some point in my teenage years, it was just common knowledge. My uncle is entirely healthy now. Nothing ever came back. And he continues to troll me and my siblings whenever he gets the chance. Story number 8. The man I grew up knowing as my grandpa is actually my mom's stepdad. My mother's biological father left to get her a cake on her 2nd birthday, and you know how the story goes. Well, he never returned. It wasn't until my grandmother tried to track him down for a divorce, after moving in with my grandpa, that he decided he wanted to see his children. When my mother was 7 years old, then when she was 9 years old, he physically assaulted sexually my mother. I always wondered why every year we went to the common Irish last name reunion when my family's name was a common German last name. My mother told me when I was 13. We were at the Irish last name reunion when my friend and I were swept up in the river. We almost drowned. I got out of the water before my friend and my cousin pulled her out of the water from their boat. A man that I've never actually met, though I saw him every year, had been running along the riverbank and pretty much tackled me when I got out of the water. I remember him stroking my hair and talking about how happy he was that I was safe. He grabbed me by the arm and walked me back to the campsite where the reunion was held. I remember feeling super uneasy because I was alone with him and everyone always told me not to talk to him. When we got back to the campsite, my mother came running to me. She pushed the man and started yelling at him about how he was to never touch me. When she asked me if I was okay, she asked if he touched me in any way that made me scared or uncomfortable. Then she cried and told me that he was actually her dad, and what happened to her. After that, every time he saw me at the reunion, and when he was dying, he insisted that I call him Grandpa, and it never stopped giving me the heebie-jeebies. Story number 9. Well, this one's a doozy. I joined a karate dojo when I was about 5, which I've been told often before because my brother was a part of it before me. I never wondered why he joined, or how he started karate when he was only 4, because it was just a regular part of life for me. I was only 1 when he joined the dojo. Once I was screwing around on a school Chromebook and thought it would be fun to look up the names of my family. At some point I looked up and I quote, family name and the city I live in, and found a news article which featured names which were suspiciously exactly the ones in our family. Apparently a dude who was getting chased by the police for stealing cars and high out of his mind ran into our home of 4. In Canada, it's actually common to leave your front door unlocked when you're home. Yeah, I know. And took my father hostage with a knife to his throat. There was a part about my brother, age 4 at the time, grabbing his plastic samurai sword. We would regularly visit family in Japan, and he probably got it there. And running to where my father was taken a hostage. Of course, my mother took my brother and ran, but I was 12 months old, was left in my bedroom sleeping. My father calmly talked to the crazy car-stealing dude, and the police managed to get him out alive. When I talked to my father about it over the phone, he said he still has scars from the incident. I asked my mother about it too, and she confirmed this all was true. adding in small details about running to the neighbor's home and the police being shocked by the information of a baby being in the house. A couple months later, I was trying to make small talk with my mother and ended up asking why my brother joined the karate dojo. She said, and I quote, "You don't know, honey? Something happened that made him want to get stronger?" That was when I connected the dots, and that my brother joined the dojo at such a young age because he could not save his dad with the plastic samurai sword. Wow. What's up, everybody? Mr. Redito here. That concludes today's stories of some family secrets. If you have some secrets that were told to you later in life and you're just like, oh, well, that makes sense now, let me hear it down below in the comment section. And if you want more future videos, just know I post every single day. So make sure you subscribe to the channel for upcoming videos. Have a fantastic day, and I will catch you guys tomorrow. Peace.